Just want to thank you for 50,000 subscribers. Reading everyone's comments has made these past months bearable. Y'all ready to watch a movie that should have been a Tubi movie? Late one night, a wealthy black couple named James and Vanessa watch the news and see a report about a police officer shooting an unarmed black kid. When the officer's name is revealed, Vanessa immediately recognizes him as their neighbor, Brian. Vanessa isn't shocked, remembering times when Brian made racist remarks toward her, like saying, "you people." James, however, isn't quick to judge and wants to consider all the facts. Ice Spice over here is pessimistic AF and says he's going to be exonerated. However, James says if there's proof he did something wrong, then he'll be charged. Vanessa is shocked because there's clear footage of Brian killing the kid in cold blood. They decide to post something on social media about it. James and Vanessa get stuck debating the small details of their social media post, struggling to agree on how to word it. Frustrated, Vanessa pushes for a more direct approach, convincing James to confront Brian himself armed with his gun. James shows Vanessa how he's going to confront Brian, but this gets Vanessa's kitty anxious. And before you know it, this kinky couple get distracted and play bedroom rodeo. The next morning, James and Vanessa head to work, both experiencing persistent racism from their coworkers. Vanessa's coworker notes that she looks similar to an actress in a slavery movie. And if I wasn't a Christian woman, I'd have more words about this white amphetamines. By the end of the day, James's coworker says he's one of the good black brothers. Though frustrating, they push through their day as usual. After work, James' Foyne-ass gets dressed into his bicycle fit and does white people exercise. Meanwhile, Vanessa stops by the grocery store because they are hosting dinner for James's brother, Jamal, and his pregnant fiancée, Candy. While unpacking groceries, Vanessa notices eyes too close Brian standing in his front yard. Without hesitation, she decides to confront him. Approaching him directly, she demands answers, questioning how he can live with himself after taking a child's life. Brian, showing no remorse, refuses to engage and dismisses her outright. The conversation quickly turns hostile, with Brian insulting her and threatening her before demanding that she leave his property. Shaken by the encounter, Vanessa returns inside, barely holding back tears. Overwhelmed with frustration, she interrupts James in the middle of his evening climax to tell him what happened. She expects him to share in her outrage, but instead he questions her decision to confront Brian, arguing that they don't know the full story. Vanessa insists that Brian's indifference speaks for itself, but James remains hesitant, unwilling to make assumptions. The conversation quickly escalates into an argument. While Vanessa believes silence only enables injustice, James sees the situation as something they have no control over. Determined to de-escalate the situation, James heads over to Brian's house later that evening, hoping for a calm discussion. However, Brian is defensive and dismissive from the start, making it clear that he has no interest in smoothing things over. James attempts to reason with him, but Brian's hostility only grows. With clear disdain, Brian tells James to control his wife before turning away and heading back inside. Vanessa suddenly appears, gun in hand. Her presence alone shifts the dynamic, and when Brian instinctively reaches into his back pocket, Vanessa doesn't hesitate. Assuming he's armed, she raises her gun and forces him to step away from his house. With no other choice, Brian complies as she orders his pale ass toward their home. Brian, though clearly frustrated, remains composed and tries to defuse the situation. He tells them they still have a way out. If they leave now, he'll pretend this never happened. For a brief moment, James seems willing to take the out, eager to end things before they spiral out of control. But Vanessa wears the strap on in the relationship, asserting that this is their opportunity to finally confront Brian for his actions. Reluctantly, James follows her lead, knowing they've crossed a line that will be difficult to undo. Inside their garage, Brian is forced into a chair, as James, at Vanessa's insistence, secures him with duct tape. The weight of the moment settles in as Brian glares at them, unimpressed by their tactics. Calm but condescending, he warns them that what they're doing is reckless and will only make things worse for them. James, visibly uneasy, assures him that he just needs time to calm his toxic goddess. Vanessa insists that all she wants is an honest conversation with Brian, one where he can finally acknowledge the deep-seated biases that led to his actions. But James, now exasperated, snaps back, pointing out that tying someone to a chair is hardly the setting for a civilized discussion. The growing divide between them becomes evident as Vanessa argues that Brian is just another product of a generational cycle of hate, one that must be broken. As the tension in the garage escalates, James drops an unexpected revelation. He has been seeing a therapist named Sheila. The confession leaves Vanessa too stunned to speak. James, attempting to explain, insists that his therapy sessions were never meant to be a secret and that he sought help to better understand his own emotions. However, instead of being reassured, Vanessa becomes fixated on the idea that James is attracted to his therapist. Vanessa is like, "That boy's Aaliyah. That boy's Aaliyah." Their argument quickly intensifies. Meanwhile, Brian, who has remained silent up until this point, seizes the opportunity. Despite still being taped to the chair, he manages to shuffle forward, standing up and using his head against the garage door opener. As the door begins to lift, James and Vanessa snap out of their heated exchange, realizing too late what Brian has done. Vanessa reacts first, immediately grabbing the gun and pointing it at Brian, forcing him to stop, saying, "Think you the shit? You're not even the fart." The moment of near escape is lost, and she swiftly takes control of the situation again. With no other choice, James helps her maneuver Brian inside the house, now fully aware that they are past the point of no return. They move Brian into the home office, securing him there just as the unexpected sound of the doorbell rings through the house. James and Vanessa freeze as they remember their dinner plans with Jamal and Candy. Panic sets in as Brian, recognizing an opportunity, begins shouting for help. Without hesitation, James rushes over, taping Brian's small lips shut before he can make too much noise. As if on cue, Brian's phone starts ringing, another potential lifeline, but James quickly snatches it away, silencing the call before shoving the phone into his pocket. With only seconds to compose themselves, they stash away the gun and take a deep breath before opening the door. Jamal and Candy step inside, completely unaware of the chaos. Vanessa and James force smiles, pretending everything is normal. As the evening progresses, Candy excuses herself to use the bathroom, leaving Jamal alone with James. Amazed by the new home renovations, Jamal glances toward the office door, wanting to check it out. Before he can look further, James quickly intercepts, guiding him toward the kitchen under the pretense of catching up. Jamal asks if they arrived too early since dinner hasn't even been prepared. Despite the small talk and attempts at distraction, the atmosphere in the house remains thicker than my neck, the sound of low battery on the smoke detector looming over them all. Behind the closed office door, Brian remains bound, his muffled struggles a constant reminder that the situation is only growing worse with each passing moment. As Candy returns from the bathroom, she joins Vanessa in the kitchen and watches her prepare the meal. However, upon seeing Vanessa handling the chicken, she wonders if she washed it first. But also, Candy is vegan, gluten-free, spice-free, red dye-free, catching Vanessa off guard. Vanessa hesitates for a moment but quickly recovers, offering to prepare a separate dish for Candy, which consists of H2O only. Despite the minor hiccup, the group moves to the living room to enjoy appetizers while waiting for the food to cook. As they settle in, the conversation takes an unexpected turn when Candy begins discussing her pregnancy plans. She reveals that she has no intention of giving birth in a hospital, believing it carries negative energy because of science and doctors. Instead, she insists on having an all-natural home birth with no medical interventions, including vaccines or painkillers. Her unconventional views leave Vanessa visibly uneasy, though she bites her tongue to avoid another argument. Meanwhile, muffled noises begin emanating from the office where Brian is tied up. Though subtle, the sounds are enough to make James tense up. Before anyone else can take notice, another problem arises. Brian's phone, still in James's pocket, suddenly begins ringing. James immediately jumps up, pretending to take a work call, and Vanessa follows after him, sensing the urgency. In the hallway away from their guests, James quickly comes up with a plan. He suggests fabricating a work emergency to get Jamal and Candy to leave early. Vanessa, though reluctant at first, ultimately agrees, realizing it's the easiest way to end the dinner without raising suspicion. Vanessa steps into the office, gun in hand, and glares at Brian as he tries to make noise through the tape covering his mouth. She presses the weapon to his temple, silently warning him to stay quiet. Meanwhile, James returns to the living room and initiates his plan, pretending to be on a serious phone call about work. However, in the rush to sell his act, James accidentally puts the call on speaker. To his horror, Vanessa's loud-ass voice goes through, ranting about how Jamal and Candy need to get the steppin'. The moment Vanessa steps back into the living room, Jamal and Candy stare at her in disbelief, their expressions a mix of hurt and anger. Overwhelmed with embarrassment and guilt, Vanessa's fake ass makes up a story about being jealous that Candy can get pregnant and she can't. Then she abruptly storms out of the room, unable to face them. James hesitates for a moment before following her back into the office. Inside the office, the tension between James and Vanessa reaches its peak. Vanessa, still furious and humiliated, grabs the gun and points it at Brian, threatening to put a bullet in his chest. Her hands tremble as she grips the weapon tightly, her emotions boiling over. James, trying to de-escalate the situation, steps forward and slowly removes the tape from Brian's mouth. Brian calmly tells James to grab his phone and send a text to his daughter, apologizing for missing their plans and making up an excuse about being stuck at work. James hesitates, but he complies, hoping to keep things contained for as long as possible. Brian then says that he needs to use the bathroom. Knowing they can't risk any further complications, James reluctantly agrees to take him, guiding him out of the office with his hands still bound. He stands guard as Brian does his business, but the moment James lets his guard down, Brian makes his move. With surprising speed, Brian lunges and grabs hold of the gun. A violent struggle erupts, then hungry, Brian sinks his teeth into James's ear, causing him to recoil in pain. Using the moment to his advantage, Brian bursts out of the bathroom, sprinting toward the front door. But before he can reach freedom, Jamal steps in. Seeing a man bolting out of the office, Jamal goes Tyler Perry on his ass. He tackles Brian to the ground, pinning him with brute force. Jamal's hits come fast and hard, unleashing pent-up aggression against cops. Once Brian is subdued, they tape him to the chair again. Everyone is rattled, their nerves frayed beyond repair. Jamal bluntly states that the only real way out of this mess is to kill Brian. Candy, horrified, immediately objects. She states that bringing death into their home will only bring bad juju to their unborn child. As they bicker, Brian begins stirring. His big-ass head lolls forward before he lifts it with great effort, his expression weary but defiant. The room falls silent as Brian, for the first time, genuinely speaks about the incident that started it all. He claims he was simply responding to a call and never even saw the child's face before the shooting. Before he can continue, his body suddenly tenses. He convulses slightly, having a small seizure. Brian barely manages to murmur that he has epilepsy. His condition requires medication, and without it, he could suffer a major seizure like Brenda. Faced with the possibility of an unexpected death in their home, James and Jamal exchange uneasy glances. The last thing they need is for Brian to die under their watch. Seeing no other option, they decide to go to Brian's house and retrieve his medication, setting aside their hostilities, at least for now. While there, Jamal finds Brian's very aggressive P-Hub collection. Then he notices a photo of Brian with his white wife and daughter, realizing Brian had lied earlier when he compared Vanessa to his ex, and James finds overdue bills and notices piling up in Brian's name. Meanwhile, Vanessa confronts Candy about having an affair with James. She doesn't deny it. So this hoe slept with both brothers? When they return, James decides to strike a deal. As a wealthy lawyer with a comfortable lifestyle, he is in a much better financial position than Brian, who is drowning in debt and struggling with alimony on his low-cop salary. James lays out his offer. $50,000 a year for 3 years if Brian keeps quiet about everything that happened. Brian, seeing no better option, agrees to the deal. Just as James is about to untie him, Jamal, who has been watching the news, stumbles upon a shocking revelation. The child Brian shot and killed wasn't black, it was a white boy. Gagged. From the start, everyone assumed the shooting was racially motivated. To Brian, it didn't make a difference because he killed a child. Jamal, shaken by the revelation, barely has time to process it before Candy suddenly goes into labor. Forced to push his thoughts aside, he rushes off to take her to the hospital, leaving the couple alone with Brian. Eventually, James admits to having an affair with Candy. However, he was told by his doctor he could never have children, so he knows Candy's child is his brother's. James, still committed to making the deal, begins cutting through Brian's restraints. As they talk, Brian finally reveals his true feelings. His issue with James and Vanessa was never about race, it was about money. He resented their wealth, their status, their privileged lifestyle, all while he struggled to make ends meet. Yo ass had years of white privilege and didn't take advantage. As James retrieves a pair of scissors to cut off Brian's restraints, Brian calls him brother before adding, "You're one of the good ones." The phrase strikes a nerve. Hearing it again, especially from Brian, makes something inside James snap. Without thinking, he grabs his gun and shoots Brian, ending it all in a single moment. The movie ends just like that. We don't know if anyone got in trouble for killing Brian. I gotta say, this movie was profound in its discussions about race, but the execution was lacking. It's called A Lot of Nothing, and that's how I felt by the end of it. The acting was top-notch, though. What did you guys think of this one?
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.